We will get started with our Board of
That
Equalization.
sounds ominous.
Is that you, Bert? How about now? That sounds better. Okay. All right. Item number 1, approve the minutes. Item 2 and item 3 and 4, they're all minutes.
Yes, 5 and 6.
So
Well,
just 1 through 4 for each October, and then 2 and 3 in November meetings of BOE.
there was, excuse me, there was nothing in each of these that I felt like I need to hold on to. So I'm happy to make a motion that we adopt items 1 through 4.
Okay. And I will suspend the rules with Commissioner Gardner being gone and second the motion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so now we're on item 5, approve the assessor approved review report. Any questions there?
None for me.
Okay.
I can make a motion to approve item number 5.
Okay, and I will second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Approve Board of Equalization hearing process report dated 11/28/23. Anything there?
Nothing for me on that one.
I mean, neither.
I can make a motion that we adopt item number 6.
Okay, I'll second that. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. On to item 7, approve or deny petition to Board of Equalization to hear appeal of property valuation after filing deadline for Providence Town Center, LLC.
Yeah, this is a late filed appeal. They're requesting the petition be accepted on the basis of factual error. If the assessor's office agrees of the probability of an existence of a factual error, then the auditor's office would recommend approval.
And do we have?
I don't know if anyone from the assessor's office is here to want to speak to it. Oh, there we go.
There he is.
No problem. Yeah, there's a factual error here. The original building permit was on a mother lot. Then it got segregated and whoever did the building permits put the serial number to the permit on the wrong serial number and the values got put on. So there's a factual error and we'll get it all fixed.
Okay, sounds like we're okay with an approval of that one.
I can make a motion to approve item number 7.
Okay, I'll second that. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Approve or deny application for review of Board of Equalization of Farmland Assessment Act, status for Milks Properties LLC.
Hello. So I'm Katrina Cole from the Utah County Attorney's Office. I'm not here with Diane Garcia. She got stuck in a meeting in Salt Lake this morning in a hearing. So I'm here today just to speak on the assessor's behalf. As you're aware, the assessor's office has a statutory and constitutional duty under Articles 13, Section 2 of the Utah State Constitution to ensure that everyone is assessed and taxed at a uniform and equal rate. Therefore, taxpayers applying for preferential tax treatment, such as Greenbelt, must be strictly eligible to qualify for that preferential treatment. Otherwise, we're unfairly shifting tax burdens to other taxpayers across the county. So as a brief overview of Greenbelt, as you guys are aware of it already, but just to overview it again, property can qualify for this preferential tax treatment under Utah Code 59-2, Part 5, if it is 5 or more contiguous acres, is actively devoted to agricultural use, has a reasonable expectation of profit, and meets some other qualifications that are at issue today. So for Milk's property, this property doesn't meet the production levels required, which the taxpayer does admit to. But my understanding is that the position is that he doesn't want to even use it for agricultural purposes. My understanding is that he believes it's unfair that he has to pay the rollback for the years he didn't own the property. And while we do sympathize that is difficult to have to pay something that maybe you don't feel like you got the benefit for. However, under state law, there is a 5-year rollback once a property gets off of Greenbelt, regardless of who the owner is. And again, we do sympathize, but the law says what it says, and it's the assessor's job to follow the law. And so we are recommending a denial of this appeal.
Okay. Is there someone from Milks here? Thank you. You'll just let us know your...
Yes, thank you.
Your
Good
name
afternoon.
and-
My name is Brady Gibbs. I represent Milks Properties. This is Mr. Millicam, the owner of Milks Properties. There is no one's contesting here the statutory language or the duty to assess property taxes And I think that's great that there's sympathy to the landowner here. Let me give you a basic exposition of what happened here. September 26th, my client buys a piece of property. Less than a month later, and after having a conversation with Ms. Garcia, he's assessed a 5-year rollback on property taxes. When Ms. Garcia represents in her letter, and that, by the way, that's a hefty sum, $87,410.78, which my client had no control over the use of that property, nor right to control the prior owner's actions with respect to that property. Moreover, those property taxes had been assessed all the way from 2000 for the prior 5 years and had been paid. So if the property hadn't been used for permissible purposes or didn't qualify for Greenbelt, I think there was an obligation on the county to raise that issue prior to the transference of the property to my client when there was something he could have done about it to negotiate that into the purchase price. What appears to have happened is Mr. Millicam came in to speak with Ms. Garcia about what he needed to do to keep it in Greenbelt in the future. This is a parcel of property, approximately 15 acres, I believe. And there's a horse arena in it, and so it has agricultural value. Mr. Millicam is putting a motocross track on it to try to help some of the uses in Spanish Fork City, provide some opportunities for kids who are on a very high level for motocross who don't have a lot of opportunities, and frankly as an opportunity for some additional income for the city. And so that's his purpose of having this. Now, he wanted to inquire as to what could be done to the extent that there wasn't the property wasn't being used for permissible purposes to keep it in Greenbelt. And that same day he received a letter indicating the $87,410.78 rollback on that. Here's the problems that we have, and there's really four major issues, I think, associated with this application of a rollback. According to the letter that Mr. Millicam received in conjunction with the 5-year rollback, Ms. Garcia indicates that per on-site and aerial observations, along with today's phone conversation with Chris Millicam, it has been determined that the property has not met the agricultural production requirements for at least the last 2 years. So according to Ms. Garcia, there were some aerial observations, which I don't know when they were, and she doesn't indicate when they were, along with today's phone conversation. Now, Mr. Millicam wasn't associated with the property, as I previously mentioned, and he doesn't know how the property was used in the last several years, especially the last 2 years. So I don't know what that conversation with him would have had to do with her decision to assert a 5-year rollback. And I agree with counsel that the county can impose up to a 5-year rollback. That's not mandatory. The county doesn't have to go back 5 years. That's the statute of limitations, meaning that the rollback can occur any time between the current year and 5 years. 5 years is only the longest permissible rollback that can be initiated. To impose a 5-year rollback with evidence indicating that Ms. Garcia only has knowledge of what occurred for the last 2 years is an assertion of another 3 years of rollback that there seems to be insufficient evidence for. She says aerial observation along with today's phone conversation, and she said on-site as well. So when was this on-site performed? I'm not sure when the on-site was. If the on-site was performed prior to Mr. Millicam's purchase of the property, then absolutely the county had a duty to assess that and roll that back prior to the transference of the purchase or of the title to the property. So my first argument with respect to that is that there's insufficient evidence to come back and assert a 5-year rollback against Milk's properties on this property. Second, there's obvious overriding principles of laches and equitable estoppel at work here. Prior to September 26, Mr. Millicam had no control nor right to control the property. The prior owner, Ms. Heathman, they had no agency relationship, so Mr. Millicam didn't have any ability to direct the use of that property or the non-use of that property to the extent it didn't qualify for greenbelt for the last 5 years. The county was in the best possible position to determine in prior years how the land situated in these boundaries was being used, and to the extent appropriate, make adjustments to the property tax values. In fact, in each of the preceding years, the county did make adjustments to the property values. If you go back and look at the prior 5-year history from 2023 to 2019, each of those years there was a valuation difference on the property. If there was a valuation difference, that presupposes that there was some evidence to suggest that the property values should have been altered, which would typically include the ability to go in and do aerial observations or on-site evaluations to see how the property was actually being used. If the county didn't do that, it's a little bit patently unfair, and frankly, I think the county's a stop from now coming against a subsequent owner of that property for diligence that the county didn't do when it was previously owned. The third issue Mr. Millicam has is this is, unfortunately, it seems to be some issue of a selective enforcement. This seems to be some vindication by Ms. Garcia, and Mr. Millicam doesn't understand what that is. But this property there's been no action taken despite all the opportunities the county has had to look at this property, to see this property, to determine what this property was being used for. Mr. Millicam comes in and has a conversation with Ms. Garcia, and that same day, he gets asserted a 5-year rollback when, per Ms. Garcia, she had only evidence of how the property had been used for the last 2 years. I don't know what was said in that conversation. Mr. Millicam doesn't know what he said that might have set Ms. Garcia off, but apparently she didn't like whatever was being offered in that conversation. And this, then the issuance of the letter and the notice of the rollback taxes on that same day seems to be a clear issue of vindictiveness that I think that Mr. Millicam and Milk's Properties has a 14th Amendment right to protect. Finally, the issue is that the rollback has been incorrectly calculated. That rollback has each of the preceding 5 years on amounts. According to Utah County's own publications, the way that we look at rollback, if it was asserted, which I would argue that it shouldn't be, at least for evidence for the 3 years prior that Ms. Garcia didn't seem to have any evidence for. But to the extent a rollback is appropriate, again, I don't think it is, but to the extent you believe it is, the rollback tax is the difference between the taxes paid while on greenbelt and the taxes which would have been paid had the property been assessed at market value. Well, the property was assessed at market value in each of the preceding 5 years, and that amount was paid. I can tell you in 2019, the county received and cashed checks in the amount of $3,660.44 in 2019. In 2020, they received and cashed monies in the amount of $3,861.19, all the way through 2022. Now, it's interesting on the assessor's website, the property is showing an unpaid amount for 2023 of $3,139.90, which is currently owed, showing on that website for that parcel. But from 2019 to 2022, the total paid on that property in property taxes has been $14,478.42, which is not applied on the rollback. And according to the county's own method of calculating, that should have been shown as an offset. It's my client's argument and his hope that the county, this board will see this issue for what it is and not apply 5 years of rollback.
Thank you. And, sure, Katrina. But I wanted to be clear on one thing, and that was just that there's really not an argument that it's not greenbelt now.
My client is not
Moving forward.
currently using it as greenbelt. He plans to in the future, but he is
I
not.
can explain that if you want.
Please, go ahead.
Okay.
So when we bought this property, our kids race on a series of, national races, and there's no place to go ride. There's no place. So my wife and I decided, okay, let's buy this parcel. it's 10 feet of weeds, you know, there's the barn's this and whatever, and I don't know what's going on. I've come into the contract on it when I buy it. Everybody in town, city council, people, what are you doing with it? What are you doing with it? And then I'm like, I'm going to mow it first of all and see what's going on. So when I buy the parcel, the banker's like, you need to keep it in Greenbelt because when I bought it on title, it shows on their side. And I went back and asked him, it shows in Greenbelt. So I'm like, okay, so he has a thing on Greenbelt or whatever. And he's like, so I asked him, Mark, how do I do this? Whatever. And he's like, go in and just make sure you do what they need and whatever. Well, I have a business in Spanish Fork. I follow all the rules of Spanish Fork. I pay my taxes. I pay $100,000 in sales tax. I maintain, like, if you ask around in that city, I'm pretty like on top of what I'm doing. So it's not like I'm going out to have my hands slapped and avoid taxes. However, in saying that, I call the assessor and I go in there. Diane's not working. I call her. They give her my number. I call her. And then she calls me 3 days later. And when she calls me, I don't know what, she's like, are you putting apartments there? Or are you doing this? Or are you doing that? And I'm like, no, I want to put a motocross track there. For what? I said, because there's a lot of kids that ride on a national level that can't do that. And she's like, well, I drive by there every single day. And she said that. And then she's like, and I said, why are you so resentful towards this? Like, what is going on? She's like, well, I can see what you're doing. I think that's good, but it just concerns me. I'm like, okay. So I could tell the conversation wasn't going well. So I like, okay, whatever. So I go home and I talk to my wife. And the next day I call her back up and I'm like, hey, Diane, I just want to have this conversation because I felt like there was a lot of resentment and like anger. Like it didn't go well for either one of us. I think that I was tense because I was trying to get my way. You were trying to get your way. I want to have a conversation with you. And she says, well, it's in Ag 1 and it's this, and she educated, and I'm like, I just don't know. Like, I don't know what Ag is. I don't know what Greenbelt is. It's like every property we've ever got the opportunity to get has been commercial, and that's where it's sat. And I'm like, okay, so educate me on this. So she spent probably 30 minutes on telling me, this is agriculture, this is what it is, this is what it is, and this is what it's not. And if you want to turn it into a motocross track, it's not. And I'm like, well, what about the barn? Because the barn, since we've owned it in 2.5 months, we've been letting girls use it, the right horses that go to the Spanish Fork arena, and they wait. Like, here's the numbers. I kept track because I knew this was going to come up just in our barn. So I raked the barn and I put probably $10,000 in sand and dirt just to make it, to donate to these kids. In October alone, 65 girls used that arena. The motocross track was 147. That's 212 kids that used it in October that didn't do anything inside their house. In November, keep in mind, we didn't have a freezing year. The numbers went down. The arena went up. 63 girls used that arena. And I'm telling you, if a girl goes there 3 times, I counted it 3 times. You know, it's just like anything you do. If there's 10 people show up and there's the same, it's like you go to the gym, you went to the gym 5 times. That's the same way that I counted this. And I was doing the numbers on this and I was astonished because I'm not trying to keep it in Greenbelt. Obviously, you know, I'm not ignorant to my taxes. If you look at the way Utah Motor runs our taxes, like we pay early to get our benefits. The thing that bothers me is it's like, if I get taxed on this amount, I don't want to charge these kids, but I will. And I don't think that's fair. And that's just kind of where I stand.
That's why I asked the question. I think it's important because we'll deal with one issue at a time. And I think there's opportunities, for example, in indoor soccer, we have seen fit for, you know, helping abate taxes on things like that, right? And those can be conversations. So that's kind of why I asked
And I'm
that
not
question.
trying to evade taxes. I got called into the city on Halloween, and I went from the FEMA, I went from SWIP, I went to Commerce, I went to the top of the licensing, and the only thing they said is, "What are you doing?" I said, "I am giving back to society. I'm giving to this community the opportunity." And the only thing they said was, "We don't see anything wrong with it. You've got to bring this berm down because it's in the FEMA flood zone." Well, we were bringing in dirt that day, obviously, so we brought it down. And then they said, just don't apply for a business license. I'm not doing it to make money. I have multiple other businesses. to do that, I have 2 boys that race dirt bikes. And everybody else I say, and him included, I do this so the kids can ride. And when those 2 boys grow up and go to college, somebody else can buy that property and come in here and do whatever they want with it. But for right now, if you could come down to the barn and see what these kids are doing. It's sad how many kids don't get the opportunity to get out of the house. I had a kid yesterday show up yesterday to ride our track. He waited for his dad to get off work in Payson, drove over to our dealership, drove over to the track with his boots on and everything, waited for his dad. When his dad got home from work at 4:30, they drove over, had his dirt bike, had his boots on and gear on, and he says, my kid's been waiting 3 hours to come over here and ride. Okay? I can't let him ride. My liability cannot, if he gets hurt, I'm personally sued. But guess what? I told my son, get your dirt bike and go ride with him for 3 laps. That guy was crying last night. He's like, this is the nicest thing that anybody's ever done. And I don't do it to be nice. I do it to raise my 2 boys, which is our obligation as human beings that is going away drastically fast. And if I pay taxes like that, how's a guy supposed to survive to give back to the community? That's all I'm asking. I'm not asking to say, hey, let's keep it in the green belt and let me screw the system and let's do this. I'm not that guy. I get that we have to pay property taxes. I hate it. I hate it like I just paid my property taxes, a grip load. And it's like, but as a society, can we not have a little bit of mercy and be like, okay, like, when was the last time, all of us are old enough, in our backyards, every dad would put a hose together and put it so we could go ride. Now that doesn't exist. All you do is get complaints, get called into the city, get called in to talk to you guys. Dude, I'm willing to take the risk for these kids to have an opportunity to be kids. And that's all. Just hear my case. Like I get, we can keep it in agriculture. One day it'll be commercial. I pay commercial taxes on multiple properties. I get it. But to get kicked like that, it's pretty unfair. And to be treated like that is way unfair because I don't treat people that way. Thanks for hearing me out.
Thank you. Katrina?
Can I make a few clarifying points real quick?
Sure.
First of all, this isn't a matter of being vindictive. Diane's not trying to, stick it to anybody or anything like that. We're simply trying to follow the law and, as I said, not shift tax burdens onto other people. The law doesn't differentiate between ownership. This property did receive a tax benefit for many years under Greenbelt, and the law is that there is a 5-year rollback. To clarify, it is 5 years. It says in 59.2.506, Section 3, subsection B, for the purposes of this section, the rollback period is a time period that begins on the date of either the date that the land is first assessed under this part or 5 years preceding the day on which the county assessor mails a notice required by subsection 5. In this case, it would be 5 years because it looks like this was on Greenbelt for more than 5 years. So it is statutorily required for 5 years, not less. Additionally, it is not the county's job to go and make sure that everyone's compliant with Greenbelt. It actually is under that same, under 59.2.506, it does say that it is the property owner's responsibility to notify the county if it is no longer on Greenbelt. It should have been, if the previous owner didn't do it, that was their responsibility to do it. It's the responsibility of the taxpayer today to notify if things aren't on Greenbelt. So those are the points I want to clarify. I don't have enough knowledge about the breakdown of this rollback to speak to. I think maybe Theron or Diane might have some more insight about it.
I missed that part.
Yeah, she walked in a little bit late. But
It's basically saying that, from what I gathered, was that over a 3-year period of time, we've collected over 14,000 in taxes. Is that correct? What you were saying?
2019 to 2022, 14,478.42 was already collected in taxes, which should
Okay.
have been applied towards this rollback amount.
So that was issue number 4, right? Correct.
and
Yeah.
it is correct that it says in the statute that the rollback tax is computed for the difference between the tax paid while the land was assessed into this part and the tax that would have been paid. That is the correct calculation.
So if you look at it, so the top section is the market value. So it has the market value, so say, we'll just go through 2023 just as an example. So it shows the 15.54 acres, and then it shows the total assessed value at $2,513,400. And then it says how much of the 15.54 acres is being rolled back, and it's the whole parcel. So it's the 15.54, so it has that market value again. And then it has the tax rate for 2023, and so each year is very specific as to what the value was and what the tax rate is. And then, so the total tax was $24,357. That's what it would have been off Greenbelt. That's what they would have paid had it not been on Greenbelt for 2023. And so those figures straight across the board. So for 2019, the taxes would have been $8,799. So then the bottom column section is saying the Greenbelt value, and that's based on the land classification times the acreage, comes up to the $8,702. So the Greenbelt taxes were $84.33. So that's how much they pay taxes on Greenbelt. And then the $24,273.03 is the difference between what they would have paid and what they did pay. And it goes for the previous 5 years, so all the way to 2019. So it's a formula. It takes each valuation into consideration for each year. It takes each tax rate into consideration.
Can we ask the applicant where he came up with the 13,000?
Yeah, from the assessor's website showing the payment and receipt of the property taxes. So Ms. Heathrow, the prior property owner, paid the actual amount, sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I know what you're saying.
I-
Okay.
I'm being beckoned.
No, you're good. You're good.
So the prior property owner actually paid the amount of 14,000 and change for taxes that do not appear as a calculation on
Right.
this document.
So when Greenbelt occurs, that is just the land. So the amount he's talking about is the building. So the building doesn't get any Greenbelt, and any buildings, home, agricultural buildings, commercial buildings, any buildings on a property that value does not get calculated in a rollback. So yes, they could have paid that on their assessment so it would have been whatever the building was plus the, in 2019, $363. So
It would have been the combination of taxes assessed on the entire parcel. So therefore, if there's a breakdown that needs to occur between the building and the land, that has not been done.
So can you go to a value screen? No, oh, okay, sorry. I saw a tax screen before. Okay, so this is showing you the top column where it says real estate. That is the market value. That only comes into play when there's a rollback. That is not what they're taxed on when they're on Greenbelt. Then the center column is the value of any improvements. And so improvements are buildings. So there's residential. If it was a residential building, they would have gotten a residential exemption had it been a primary residence. And then it's in the agricultural slot. And so then that amount, and it's a little blurry for me, but 300,000 something, right? Added to what the real estate value is for Greenbelt. And you've got which year you're on, 19? Okay.
Yes, 19. You want me to go back to
It's just,
23?
I'm just having to focus back and forth. Okay, oh, thanks. So those two added together make that $333,404, and that's what they're taxed on every year. So yes, their taxes were more, but not not the portion that was in Greenbelt. Is that a little clearer? Because buildings just don't get Greenbelt consideration, so they're not calculated in a rollback at all, only the land.
I mean, essentially, we're not saying that what the taxpayer is doing isn't admirable. It is, and it's great that he's helping children. The core of the issue is whether or not he's currently on Greenbelt, and whether or not the 5-year rollback is appropriate. And as he's said today, he is not on Greenbelt. He isn't intending to be on Greenbelt currently. He might in the future, but he's not on it currently. And as Diane has demonstrated, the amount is appropriate, and the statute does say that there's a 5-year rollback. That is the issue. So that's our
And
position.
bottom line, none of that rollback was paid by the previous owner as part of this transference of the property.
It wasn't, and the county should have been notified that it got off Greenbelt at that, whenever it did. But I guess that didn't happen we didn't get that notification when it happened, but.
Is there onus on that historically, like the title company, because that's where I'm also stuck on.
For the
I've listed
payment
the
of
issues under
Greenbelt?
the 4 issues that, we talked about earlier. And issue number 1 was basically,
It's
hey, I
the
bought this in
owner-
September. It
Yeah,
was like,
so the statute says it is the owner's responsibility to notify the Utah County Assessor's Office when it no longer qualifies for Greenbelt. So whether it dips below the 5 acres because they sold off some or because they ceased operation, agricultural operation, it is their responsibility to tell us. We can't monitor all 9,000 and something parcels throughout the county every day, all the time, to make sure everybody's meeting it. They actually say that when they sign the application, when the lien is placed on the property, that they will notify us within 120 days of it no longer qualifying. And the title company, and I explained this to the landowner, the current landowner, the title company usually, if you go through a title company and if it's a good title company, they will tell you because it's a lien and they're supposed to notify you of all the liens on the property. So whether it was a construction lien or a Greenbelt lien or a IRS tax lien or whatever, they're supposed to tell you that as part of closing, as part of the transaction, so that you're getting land that's free and clear of any encumbrances. And if they neglected that, then the landowner can go back on the title company, and that would be the recourse that would be preferred over having the taxpayers share this burden, a business that should have caught it as part of their responsibility should be held accountable.
and
If I may, one couple of points. I'm trying to digest that for a moment. I think what I heard was it's somebody else's fault, not the person who'd been driving by the property every day, at least in her conversations with Mr. Millicam, that this was Mr. Millicam who should have known there was a lien on the property that wasn't actually there until he actually talked to Ms. Garcia. So there was no lien on the property. There was no rollback amount being even proposed, let alone assessed, at the time that there was even negotiations happening on this property. And I disagree. The statutory scheme does not mandate a 5-year rollback. It says up to 5 years. The county has the ability to determine the amount of the rollback, or for the years of the rollback, up to 5 years. That's the statute of limitations on a rollback. So that's all I have to say on that.
okay.
Any questions?
No, thank you. I think for today's sake, we are commissioners, but we take our hat off from that, right, and put on the BOE hat today to make a decision today of whether or not to approve or deny that you are in Greenbelt. Am I thinking that incorrectly? Is that really? And then that's kind of why I asked the question earlier of like other options and what other options they have explored, and only brought up another example of, what we say do for a church organization, right? And or, meaningful things that we see fit as commissioners wearing that other hat. It's a totally different thing, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so today's question is really, should they be withdrawn from Greenbelt? And should the rollback stand, right? When it comes to a tax exemption for a charitable purpose, that's a different process, really.
That's that would require the filing of an organization to be organized as a 501c3 for the Internal Revenue through the Internal Revenue Service, have to be organized with a volunteer board and comply with all the requirements to be considered a 501c3 organization and then have to go through the qualifications to show they're meeting the public good and charitable standards required by law in order to be given a property tax exemption. Still not going to get them out of the rollback because that would be an exemption moving forward, not for the past. So, and the property have to be dedicated. The property in total has to be dedicated exclusively to a charitable, religious, or educational purpose. Educational meaning a school, so not like with the curriculum and students and teachers and everything else like that. So, but it would have to be exclusively dedicated to that. And then, again, that's a very high standard to meet, other than just doing good works with the property. So,
And just for my knowledge, the 5 years, can we address that? Yeah, okay, thank you.
It does say up to, I'm sure it does say up to 5 years, but that's because, let's say that the property was on Greenbelt for only 3 years, and then it got off Greenbelt, then you'd only assess it for the past 3 years. So if it is on Greenbelt for 5 or more years, then it is 5 years, because, again, that section that I referenced before, where it's, the rollback period begins later of the date the land is first assessed under this part, or 5 years preceding the date on which the county assessor mails the notice. So in either case, that's what the statute says, and it's either, if you've been on Greenbelt for less than 5 years, then it can be less than 5 years, but if you've been on 5 or more, then it is 5 years.
And the previous owner, how long did they have it?
Oh, she had it.
At least 5 years.
Yeah, it
At
was
least
more
five.
than 5 years.
Paul,
Yeah.
am I reading that right, or do you have any extra?
That's
insight?
my understanding.
Do you mind?
Please, yeah.
If I'm understanding that correctly, I think what she's trying to say is if the property has been on Greenbelt for the last 10 years, and it was used as Greenbelt for 9 of the 10 years, and then the new property owner comes and ceases to use it on Greenbelt, notifies the county, then I think what she's saying is a statutory mandate requires then that there be a rollback for a 5-year period, despite the fact that it was used as Greenbelt, and I don't agree with that interpretation.
Yeah.
And which really is true, right? I mean, but is there an opportunity for the new landowner to prove the prior owner's ag use? I mean, I think,
It's what it is currently. So if it no longer meets the requirement, oh, sorry.
we have millions of viewers on television needing you to be at the
So-
microphone.
I get this question all the time because new owners say, well, why should I be responsible for a previous owner's lack of meeting the requirements? And that's where that lien comes in. The lien is placed on it, and that's where it is wise for people to go through a title company so that they're made aware of that lien. Some people just think Greenbelt is Greenbelt and they don't understand it's a lien, but that's either the lack of their education or whatever. That's not because the county did anything wrong. The lien is on the land, and there could be 10 different owners in the last 10 years. And when it no longer meets the requirement is when the 5-year rollback goes into effect. So yeah, all of those previous years, they could have had, 10,000 cattle on there. But when it ceases to meet the requirements, there's a 5-year rollback, state mandated.
I guess the question that I would have then is why does the code have a 5-year statute of limitations that says that the county cannot impose a rollback for more than 5 years? If it's a mandated 5 years, there shouldn't be any requirement for a statute of limitations. There would be no statute of limitations. It would be a mandatory 5 years. Sorry, it's okay if you've used the property as Greenbelt for the prior 5 years. And now, as soon as it comes out of Greenbelt, you're going to get back assessed on a rollback for 5 years, even though the land was permissibly used for the Greenbelt purposes. Then why have a statute of limitations that says up to 5 years? We interpret our code based on giving effect to all of the provisions so that they make sense. So how would that make sense in our scheme, in our code? If it's to be interpreted as the argument is that regardless of whether it was used as greenback for the prior 5 years, you're going to pay property taxes based on if it wasn't, then why is the term may in the statute? And then why is there a limitation period?
Can you answer the question about may?
I don't think there was a may, I think it was an up to.
I would say there was, there,
Yeah,
there-
yeah,
okay, because that's a different,
correct.
that's a far different distinction here, because up to, so if it was less than 5 years that they own it, it would be less than they would actually, less than 5 years. If they owned the property or was being used as greenbelt for 5 years or more, then it would be assessed more than 5 years' worth. Did I get that right, counsel?
I'm not sure if you got that totally right, but I think at the end of the day, if you were in Greenbelt for 5 or more years, then the rollback is 5 years.
Yes. And if you
And
own
if
it
you're
for
in
less than
Greenbelt for
5
less than
years, it
5
would-
years, it's that number of
less,
years.
right.
But I think what I'm, again, reiterating is that today we're really arguing whether or not we're going to continue in Greenbelt. And then my hope is that if there's other options, who would they be able to communicate those? I mean, that's really the action in front of us on today's agenda,
Yeah.
right?
Well, depending on what actions they would want to take, you would, for example, if you wanted to try to do something in the charitable type realm, you'd work with Mr. Harvey in his office on applying for a nonprofit charitable land use exemption. Right, Bert?
That's correct.
Okay, that's one issue.
Yeah, that's correct.
And then the existing ode, right? There's also that issue, right? I bought it in September, idea, and had no idea, like payment options and things like that. And obviously these are questions outside of my BOE hat, but do you understand what I'm asking there?
Yeah. If they're looking for a deferral or a payment option, something along that realm, they could work with my office and they could request a tax adjustment
Just too
or,
bad.
tax deferral or something like that to try to work out something like that.
And that's not at all
13.47.
suggesting that's, I just want to make sure that, we are communicating well and making sure that if they're getting all their questions answered moving forward. Does that make sense?
Yep, and of course, they'll always, I mean, if the board denies the application today, they'll have an appeal opportunity with the state tax commission as well. So it's kind of all the options.
Okay. And that's kind of where I'm going. I don't see any way I can't deny it today as a Board of Equalization member because we know we're not operating in Greenbelt today, right? But as far as then all of the other questions that we have lingering, we'll probably be wearing a different hat when we're answering those questions. Does that make sense, what I'm basically suggesting and saying going forward?
Is this part of like a 1349 option? State code?
Yeah, if they were to try to do some sort of a deferral or payment plan or something
Right.
like that, that'd be under 59-2-1347.
Okay.
And my office helps process those applications.
So if we deny it today, then we could ask council to work with them to look at the best options to address the intent behind the purchase and its current use.
That's mainly what I'm suggesting, right? I just don't see any way we can't deny it knowing that we don't have any evidence that we're still in Greenbelt, right? And so the action before us today is just to approve or deny Greenbelt status. And so for today's action, I'm seeing that, but I want to make it very clear that, there's other options and opportunities and conversations that need to continue, it sounds like, for all of the other things that were discussed today. Does that make sense?
Okay. Then with that, I'll make a motion to deny.
Okay, I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And then, I don't know if, for sake of not wanting to wait around, if there's any communication that can
Get started.
make sure that they have, the contact information. Do you see what I'm getting at? Thank you, Paul. And Paul is our head civil attorney.
If you want him to get in touch with them, I'll take him.
Oh, thank you, Andrea.
She's the county assessor.
He's our recorder.
Recorder, yes.
Yeah. So, okay. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Vanilla?
We have two more items on today's agenda. Approve or deny application for review of Board of Equalization of Farmland Assessment Act status for Austin and Kylie Pay.
Hello, it's me again, Katrina Cole from the Utah County Attorney's Office. Just to reintroduce myself, and I'll abbreviate my spiel that I already gave today. It's we have a duty to assess at an equal, uniform rate, and by allowing people to be on Greenbelt, we shift that burden to the taxpayers. And if somebody's somebody's not on Greenbelt, then we need to shift that burden back to the taxpayer. And again, they have to meet the 5 or more contiguous acres requirement. It has to be actively devoted to agricultural use, have a reasonable expectation of profit, and then some other qualifications we aren't going to talk about today. So the main issue for this one is that this doesn't meet the 5 acreage requirements. The property has a space of 5.25 acres total, which you often see. And usually people use a quarter of an acre for their residential property, but in this case, the taxpayers are using 0.46 acres rather than the 0.25 acres for the residents. And that's even being, with Diane counting fairly generous areas that shouldn't necessarily be counted in the rest of the Greenbelt area. So
I show 4.5. I didn't know that. No, this is a big deal, but
yeah, so they
whereas our farm, we
the
put
tax-
4.5, which is incorrect.
yeah, 4.5,
Okay.
Rounding.
Okay.
The taxpayers even said in their initial Greenbelt that they only have 4.5 acres, though they are now claiming that they have 5.05 acres. However, the actual acreage is less than 5 acres, and so the taxpayers don't qualify for Greenbelt. They can apply for urban farming, and try to get urban farming for that, but they just don't qualify for that acreage right now.
Okay. And is someone here from the Pay family? Okay. Are you Austin?
Yes.
Okay. Come on up, Austin.
I am Austin Pay. I'm the landowner. So we just bought the property in July, I believe, and we've always heard keep it in Greenbelt. We just thought that was farming use. We did not know that was for profit when we first bought the property. Once we got the papers and saw this stuff, we're like, oh, that's no problem. We've ran businesses before. We can definitely run it for profit. And so, as you can see on the parcel map there is quite a bit of blank area around the house from the previous owners. And so you can see the darker area that is gravel. That will be where we park farm equipment, things like that we'll be purchasing. We have not received our calves yet, where they're still trying to be weaned right now. So we're purchasing cattle to run on the north acreage, which I think is approximately 3 to 3.5 acres. I did not get out my measuring stick exactly. The lighter space that's between the driveway and the north pasture, that will be turned into produce area to be sold to the public as well. Just below your arrow, we've already put in chickens there. We have 14 chickens right now currently producing eggs. And then just below that, along that back fence as well, we've already started preparations to start a garden to also sell produce. And then the south pasture, just on the south side of that house, that is also going to be used for cattle. So we can keep the bulls and the heifers separated, or, wean the calves and things like that in their area. So we have done a lot of changes over the last couple months, trying to make sure that we fit in the green belt. We always had this plan to run cattle and things like that. We didn't know we had to do it for profit, so we're just modifying that, and we'll sell off meat as well as calves and things like that. And then you can also see the landscaping just right there around the house. Our plan is also and we've already blocked it off, but we will run apple trees as well along that south side of the house, getting rid of a lot of that grass that I don't want to mow, and sell that produce as well. So
I think Bert's doing a little bit of
trying to figure it out, huh?
square up.
And so just on your south line by the house there, that will move all the way up and actually cut out some of that grass, and that'll be turned into orchard. And also we are cutting that rear section. We don't feel like we need that much darker gravel for storing hay and also parking a couple tractors. So we actually cut that rear section in half. I think we cut out about 30 feet, and that will also, part of that will be garden. Part of that will also be orchard. So the orchard will be more of an L. I'm making it fun for you. Lots of lines. But yeah, our whole goal in moving out there was to farm, and just selling a lot of our goods is totally fine by us. When my wife first initially filled out the form, she didn't understand all of it. And so, yeah, we did put 4.5 when we first sent it in, and I apologize for that. But we have also increased from the previous owners, the farm use, and we plan on increasing it even further. So, thank you.
Thanks, Austin. Okay, so, yeah.
Okay, so Bert just said that that's 4.83, his measurements.
Right there. Right with what we're looking at.
What you're
currently.
looking at right now, right? 4.83?
That's what the parcel map said. I don't guarantee that it's exactly right.
Okay.
But he had fun doing it. So a couple of things to think about, options and just additional information. Some chickens don't qualify. Those are usually, so when the law was written, it accounts for what a normal farmhouse would incorporate as their residential use. And so a garden, some chickens, a few fruit trees around the landscaping area, those are all considered residential use because of the manner in which they're managed or used. If that
And it has
makes,
to have $1,000 at least a year.
no, that's not 1,000. That was like 20 years ago. That was a requirement. It's actual level of production. Level of production. So, so I just want you to know that, so that you don't do something maybe you didn't want to intend to do, but yet you thought it might help you. Just, okay. Because I even have people say, oh, I have some rabbit hutches and stuff. And you're like, yeah, that's, So it's nice, and that's part of farm life, but it doesn't contribute towards the main production. The other thing to consider and think about is a lot of what he was just saying is things that he's going to do because they just purchased the property. And so when I look at a property, I have to look at what has been the production for the previous 2 years, not what they're going to do. So it would be very feasible, possible for them to convert to urban farming for now. And then as they expand their acreage and expand what they're doing based on their business plan and what they want to deal with, then they could convert back from urban farming to greenbelt, and the whole rollback thing can still be, shifted, deferred, whatever, so that they're only paying on that home site area.
But if I'm looking at this map, even if I go all the way up to the structure of the home, I mean, I'm really tight just to
Right.
get to the green
Right.
belt.
And so,
urban farming
but he
does
was
the same
saying
thing.
about taking out some grass and doing,
Right.
so I mean, it's within whatever they want to do, but urban farming gives them that same tax benefit. It's
benefit.
just not on as much acreage.
Right.
It's only on the acreage in production.
That's really my point. Is
So
the
he
best
does have some
option
options.
is urban farming.
And
probably.
there are people that when they get going, they want to expand, they want to do things, or they find some new thing that they want to do, and they're like, we're going to rip that out, and we're going to grow, a pumpkin patch and have people come. And so it gives them flexibility by converting to urban farming and then giving them the opportunity to expand their acreage and maybe go back to greenbelt if that's what they choose to do.
And for the application process and things of that nature, there's not a time of year. He could apply today for urban
Right, he just
farming.
has to apply by May 1st to get it on for 2024, so he could apply today all the way up till May 1st for 2024.
If that's the option that they choose, what makes the most sense here? Would it be better to continue this a few months, allow the urban farming application to go through, because then transitioning while you're on Greenbelt That's
Yeah,
easier,
usually-
I think, than
Yeah, usually
being
it's
denied and then trying to
better
get
if
on
they're
and all that.
denied Greenbelt, then they come to me and get an application to go on urban farming. And then after they're on urban farming, then they go to your different hat place for the actual dollar figure deferral of,
Well, I think
figuring
it's-
what they pay and what they don't
Yeah.
pay.
I think it's opposite, actually. I think it's.
Oh, really?
I think it's easier
But they have
to get on urban
to
farming.
deny, but they can't, because right now they're saying they're appealing Greenbelt. So how do they get on?
That's why I might suggest continuing this. Let it sit in limbo for a couple months, because going from getting on urban farming is easier if you can do it right out of Greenbelt. Then the rollback amount would only ever be, I mean, in this case, I don't know all the facts specifically, but let's say there's 5 acres in Greenbelt and you get on urban farming with 4.5, we'll only ever issue a rollback for half an acre. Instead
No,
of getting
we
the full.
we abate it. So because you're going from Greenbelt to urban farming, you have to release the Greenbelt lien. And then you start a urban farming lien. So there's
I don't want
none
to get
of,
in a big argument here.
I
Diane.
know. So far there's been
No, I
none,
think the statute allows this conversion,
yeah.
and then it lowers your rollback.
But then that means, whatever. We've never done it that way, Paul, but
Well, it's a new thing, I think, in code.
that you just thought of? No.
No, it's in there.
You just thought. Wow.
So all the other ones before that have been taken off Greenbelt, they've been denied Greenbelt. They've come to me. They've done a urban farming application. They've gotten on urban farming so they can prove that they did meet the requirements. Then they've gone to the attorney's office and said, "Here, I'm on urban farming. This was my rollback." Then we do a calculation of what they would have paid on the portion that converted to urban farming and what portion they need to pay on the residential area. They pay the residential area and the remaining gets,
I think we skipped that step.
Deferred.
I think we skipped that step of needing to go before the commissioners if we do it from one to the other, direct.
Is that way we can get this determination made before the day is over?
I might well,
What kind of recommendation can you go with two different points of?
We meet in like 2 weeks for the next
I just
DOE,
look
so-
at the releases of liens and stuff. So,
right.
That's, I just look at
If
documents,
code's been updated, it'd be good to have
sequence
some
of
unity
documents.
on this thing.
Even a couple of weeks, we can make sure we get it fleshed out.
So let,
If Mr. Pay's okay
Inclined
with that.
to table.
so let him know this. and-
So yeah, continuance is fine. That's- I
Continue,
mean,
not
that's fine.
table. Because if we
Right.
continue, then we don't. Yeah, if we table, then we know we got to meet in 2 weeks.
Right.
But
You
guys lost me in all that.
Yeah, you meet with me first, we get you an urban farming application, we get you approved, and then they want to see you again to then deny the green belt, but you're already on urban farming, and then we work out the dollar figure.
So will I pay that full rollback
No.
and all that
No.
stuff? I don't know
No.
what the difference is between urban farming and greenbelt.
that's
You know
that.
what I mean?
Yeah, we know what you mean, and it's really the same benefit, but it's for between 1 and 5 acres, and so you don't. Excuse me, 4.9. You don't qualify for a green belt, right?
So if you go by his calculations, you possibly could qualify for urban farming for
8.3.
4.83, and then you just have to pay the rollback of the difference that made it the 4.83 to the 5.25.
It probably hasn't been in greenbelt ever since they put in grass or a driveway.
Well, you mean
Because there's just
bid
not
in
there's not enough
agriculture
space,
production.
right?
You mean bid in agriculture production, right.
So
We'll
continue.
we'll continue this item and then make sure that Boston, you get with the assessor's office to make sure those applications are completed. Okay.
Alice, did we confuse you on this? I'm sorry. Maybe I should go.
No, don't go anywhere. We need a quorum. I think you're about to make a motion.
Yeah, I make a motion that we continue item number 9.
I'll second to that. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, takes us to our last item. And approve or deny application for review of Board of Equalization of Farmland Assessment Act for Ridge Rising LLC.
I'll go ahead and just skip my spiel this time.
Okay?
So I'll give a little bit of background. I'll give a little bit of background on this property, and then I'm going to go over the reasons why this property doesn't meet the requirements for greenbelt. So you guys have seen this property before. It's been in front of you. It was rolled back in December of 2022 The taxpayers put some cattle on the property for a few days in January and then removed the cattle. They appealed the rollback in February of 2023. BOE denied the appeal on the rollback, and there was maybe some thought that the county commission could help the taxpayer. But since the property still wasn't on Greenbelt, there was nothing the county commission could do. So, and then the taxpayer missed the window to appeal the BOE decision. So there was a rollback, and the taxpayer was not on Greenbelt. The taxpayer is once again trying to get on Greenbelt and is appealing a denial of that application. Diane Garcia denied the application since the taxpayer can't show that there was 2 years of production previous to the application. And again, the taxpayer is appealing that denial of the Greenbelt assessment. So there are two reasons why the taxpayer can't show the 2 years of production. The first is that it hasn't been even 2 years since BOE denied his rollback appeal. So logically, even if he got back onto production right after BOE denied his rollback appeal, the taxpayer hasn't been on Greenbelt for 2 years. It's maybe been a couple months. Second, the taxpayer contends that the property meets the production level for a lower land classification. Currently, his land is classified as irrigation 4, which has a certain production level, and he's claiming the lower classification of grazing 3, which has a lower standard of agricultural production than irrigation 4. The taxpayer contends that the property doesn't have irrigation rights. However, it did have irrigation rights, but he deeded them to Lehigh City for future commercial development. So it's not that the land doesn't have the ability, it's that he chose to give the water away. So it is properly classified as irrigation 4. Additionally, the reclassification isn't appropriate because there is a way to irrigate. There's a canal that goes onto the land, and the taxpayer claims that this canal is clogged and isn't able to be used. However, it can be cleaned up and it can be used. So it's the assessor's position that this land is properly classified. Even if reclassification is appropriate, the land would actually go to dry 3 or dry 4 instead of grazing 3 because the land meets the qualifications for dry 3 or dry 4 rather than the lower requirements for grazing 3. And the dry land classifications have the same AMU requirements as irrigated 4 does.
Total acreage, I can't remember. Just trying to see in my notes. It's not an acreage issue at all. It doesn't matter then. Hi again, guys.
Hey, hey, hey.
You're getting
I'm hot now. I was freezing before.
you gotta remind everybody, all our viewers at home, your names.
My name is Andrew Bybee, and I'm with Ridge Rising. And did we determine...
That's Sally.
Sally. Mm-hmm. You look incredibly bored, Sally. I've been watching you for about an hour, and it feels like you are ready for Christmas. And, okay. Happy to be here. Thank you. This has been fun now. I think we're going on 4 times this year, so this is great. Did you receive our letter?
Yes.
And have you each read that?
Yes, I have.
Do you have any questions on that?
I don't think so. I think it.
Pretty straightforward.
Okay. So then my question is do you accept the appeal or deny the appeal?
As of today,
based off of the letter that we've provided.
well,
Excuse me, commissioners, and for the appellant, was that letter provided to the clerk so that we could make that a part of the official record? If it was not, it can't be
It was
discussed here.
included with the appeal.
If it was included,
yeah,
okay,
that's
just want to make that
I'm
clear.
assuming that's the one because I got it from your
Excellent.
packet.
Okay, great. Just want to
It
make
is
sure that was clear.
uploaded, But great question.
Just want to make sure
Procedural,
everybody's had a chance to review it.
Yep.
And are there any questions on that? By the
I think we've
voting body.
discussed getting the water there. I saw the email exchange between the city that was also in the packet, right, saying why the water was deeded, right? Was that 2013-ish?
Yep.
Prior
So
to you guys? Or?
two things that were factually incorrect that she referenced. Tell me your name again.
Katrina.
Katrina. One is in 2022, she made the comment that we put cows on the property in January. We put cows on the property in December of 2022. We've provided those pictures in the past. We could provide them to you today as well. So there was, under the Grays 3 status, there was sufficient production in 22 evidenced to you for 2022. With respect to the water was dedicated to the city at the purchase of the property. We've never used our water that went with commercial development to water that site. The water came from the farmer in the ditch, and we've described to you what the issue with the ditches are. Yes, those ditches could be cleaned out, but it's not practical, it's not viable, and it's not safe to do that. So we've gone with Grays 3 status. I'd like to better understand.
Drive 3 or drive 4?
Drive 4, thank you. No, well, we're Grays 3.
That's what we're asking.
That's what we're asking for. She's claiming that it's not Grays 3. I'd like to better understand why that, if you're considering that into your consideration as to whether or not we're not Grays 3 and why we're Drive 4, I'd like to better understand why we're not Grays 3. Because we've been through that whole statute, we've provided all of the evidence, third-party sites that reference the amount of waterfall, and why we believe we are Grays 3. And we've met those requirements for 22 and for 23.
Would you like to?
Okay, so you want to talk about the land classification? Is that what we're?
Let's do that, and then I have another question.
Okay. So when land has typically been previously classified as irrigated land because it's had crops planted on it and it has been irrigated, and then they no longer irrigate, it converts to dry, tillable farmland. So that means they're relying on the rainfall and not irrigation so that they can still produce a crop. Graze land is land that cannot produce a crop. It is native grasses and sagebrush and things that are native. The lay of the land is not as level, it's not level flat. It hasn't been, Right. So this land has previously been cultivated, tilled, used for crop production. They have claimed, years past that they've grown hay on it and harvested hay. And there's actually aerial photos that show that. So a conversion from irrigated 4 to grazing 3, which is a extremely lower quality land, is not prudent here. It would go to dry farm 3 or 4 just based on the lack of no longer having irrigation water. And then your other question.
My other question was, it seems like, okay, so, I mean, in their letter, I don't think we're disputing that her saying January, their cows were put on, right? I mean, they're basically 5 days of cattle of 2022.
Calendar years, it's not the same difference.
It's within a few weeks of each other.
Yeah, the last week of December.
One is 2022 and one is 2023.
I'm not hung up on it, I guess, is what I'm saying. What I'm saying is I think that originally part of the reason for denial earlier this year was that we only had 5 days of cattle on the property.
Right.
And so is there anything else that I should know in terms of, like, because they have to show how much of, right? Does it matter if it's 5 days, or does it matter if, like,
Well,
help me
it wouldn't meet the
understand?
AUMs. I mean, I believe they calculated the AUMs based on grazing 3, saying, oh, we had this many for 5 days in December, so we met it based on grazing 3 requirements, not on dry tillable requirements, which would be the same as irrigated 4 requirements, the 5.21 AUMs. So I think that might be where the difference is showing. They're saying it would meet it, but that's because they're going with the lower quality land and the lesser AUMs than what it would be.
I see.
But yeah, five days in December in the snow usually is not when people are utilizing their best grazing land.
And when we evaluate, we're looking for 12 months? We're
No,
evaluating for
no, we're looking for AUMs for what was the use. So,
how
so if
long?
they're claiming that out of all of 2022, they just had that logically does not seem like that land is being used agriculturally. If you wait till the last week of December after you've been rolled back to hurry and place some cattle for a few days, what was going on the rest of the year, you know. I have to look at it logically, and if before it was rolled back, they can't show that there was any cattle on it. They only show cattle right after they were taken off Greenbelt in order for them to slide into the next year.
I can see on the edge of your seat. Remind me your name.
Carl Karen.
Carl. You're the cattle owner, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Couple comments to your, whether it was 2022 or 2023. How good would that argument go if I paid my property taxes late in 2023 for 2022? The date is the date. I mean, the year is the year. It's that simple. You know, to say 2022 doesn't count, it makes no logical sense to me. I mean, the date is the date. And so,
Yeah, and I don't think any of us misunderstood that. I think we understand.
Couple things.
We got your letter with when you.
So when you're irrigating ground, you know, especially in cities and stuff, there's a huge risk. You know, I flooded 5 basements one time, you know, in Lehigh. And does it make sense to irrigate a piece of ground when the risk outweighs the benefit? And clearly in this case, the risk outweighs the benefit. Do I flood a hotel? Do I flood the east side frontage road and have UDOT on my case? I mean, it's one thing to say you can get the water there, but you have to understand the risk and where does we call it tailwater. Where does the tailwater go? Well, if the tailwater is in the Hyatt Regency and I'm farming 5 acres of ground that I make $1,000 off of, the liability clearly outweighs the benefit. So it makes no sense. So just to say, go clean some ditches and get the water there is a very narrow-sighted view of the entire process. It just
explained also to them how to get the water across
Yeah.
the 25-foot cut that Lehigh State
Yeah,
did.
I mean, I almost wish we could all go look at this siphon and understand. If I looked at that siphon and I pulled the lid off of it and I said, let's go down there and clean that thing out, you guys would all get in your cars and turn around and drive away. You would say there's no way in heck. It's unsafe. It just doesn't make sense. And so it's just not, it's easy to sit here and say they could have irrigated. I'm the guy who's out there from 12 to 6 o'clock in the morning taking a water turn in the dark, trying to make sure I'm not flooding out the Hyatt. So that's one part. The next part is that if you have a piece of ground that's irrigated, and I've been irrigating ground in Lehigh and around here for a long time, it gets so small, it gets to a certain point where it doesn't make sense to bring a tractor. You know, I mean, if I'm going to go cut 4 acres or 2.5 acres, I got to get in my tractor and drag my swather down Tryon Boulevard or down Main Street in Lehigh or down the frontage road in front of Adobe. The only time I can do that is on Sunday morning. I mean, you should see how many times I've been flipped off, honked at, I mean, cut off, apples thrown at me. I mean, it's not that simple to say that because it can't be irrigated now, it still needs to be farmed in that specific use. It's not practical. I mean, if you look at corporate American corporate farming, they're farming thousands of acres, right? And it's because there's efficiencies. Well, you start shrinking those pieces of ground down and you lose those efficiencies and it doesn't make sense. What does make sense is to put some cows on it or some sheep or some goats or, you know, something like that. And so the good practical use is to graze that piece of ground. I mean, you can't irrigate it because the risk and the liability is astronomical. I mean, you can't dry land farm it. I mean, there's a lot of dryland farming in Utah County. You go out in Cedar Valley, I mean, they're farming thousands of acres because you have to farm that amount of ground to make it profitable, to make it worth sense. And even then, after the last 3 years, I would debate whether any of it makes any sense. I'm not going to lie. You grew up in agriculture.
Sound like my dad last night. Yeah.
So it's just frustrating because, you know, I felt like, and I feel like I've done everything I can and is required to meet the production record. And to say that the cows were in there, this was another thing I wanted to talk about and it kind of escaped my mind. When you're feeding cows, you're looking for DDM, dry digestible matter, in the winter, and then you supplement with protein. Well, if you put them out in a field, just because it's, you know, in the summer they may parch or in the winter it may be dry grass, a cow only needs about 10 pounds of alfalfa a day to get the protein and the nutrients that are required, but he needs, or she needs 25 pounds of total DDM, you know, to maintain their weight. That dry, dead grass out there that they're out there plucking away at on a cold night has a lot of value, you know, so, and, you know, and our cows, I've sold most of them now. I only have 20. I got a summary to give you about that. You know, they're in Wyoming in the winter or in the summer, and they're in town, you know, they're in Lehigh, they're in Spanish Fork, they're in Eagle Mountain, you know, Twilla. So all these little winter pastures are all being utilized, and there is benefit. So to drive out there, you know, in August and say, oh, there's no cows there. Well, they might be there in January, they might be there in February, they might be there in November and December. And so it all makes sense to me, and why we're doing what we're doing. I have no doubt, per the statute, I've met the production requirement. Whether I met it in August or I met it in December is irrelevant to me. Meeting it is meeting it. And so, and the benefit was there. I mean, you know, we're moving cows and around little places in Lehigh and out in Utah County or Twilla County right now, trying to utilize every dry blade of grass we can just to keep them full, you know, and we throw them a little hay, you know, along the way and get through winters and stuff. But anyway, does anybody have any questions about any of that? I mean, no.
Understand exactly what you're talking about. So
Maybe just to clarify a point, I don't think the assessor, this is what I want to clarify, they're allowed to graze on the property to qualify,
Right.
Yeah.
but it
So
could still be
that's- yeah.
classified
So
dry
land
farm.
does not get classified by the use, it gets classified by what it can produce. So if someone has irrigated one land, and even if they have irrigation and they say, well, we're only grazing animals, so you should qualify this as grazing land, that's not how it works. The land does not get reclassified because you choose a lesser use for it than what it can produce. So irrigated land can produce a more high valuable crop. So it's based on the type of soil, depth of soil, the level of the land, all those category things that are physical characteristics of the land that make it able to produce something. So this land could produce dry farming. They may choose not to dry farm it with a crop, but that doesn't mean it changes the land classification.
So you're
So if
saying
that
that if the
clarifies
land has
it.
been classified, it could never be changed again. So what you're saying is if the land has been zoned agricultural, it could never be changed to commercial or residential, or you could never change the use.
Oh, that would, no, I don't think that's what she's saying at all, because that would be like a Lehigh City
Yeah, but
change,
the
right? She's
principle
basically
that he's
saying-
making is that if it's been one land classification, can it not be changed to a different land classification because the access to water has changed?
And
Can
are
that
we
happen or
talking
not?
about between, say, like Grays 3, what you would like, and like her suggestion that you should be applying for dry 3 or 4?
Correct.
Is that what we're
My
discussing? Because I
question
heard
is,
him say, like,
can it move between those land classifications? Can land move between those land classifications?
So that's why I explained that if it had previously been irrigated for and they no longer irrigate because they don't have access, they've sold their water, whatever, that it could be reclassified to dry farming based on its ability to still produce a crop, that it would not just go from irrigated 4 to grazing 3, almost the lowest quality grazing. Grazing 3 is out west, west desert stuff, sandier soil. It's just completely not comparable. There is a lot of dry farming land in the north end of the county. And even before all the commercial development, that's what they did. They dry farmed it and they did not irrigate it. And same thing with, Saratoga Springs. That whole area historically has had a lot of dry farming land, and that's because geologically, geographically, that's the characteristic of the land. And then if they brought in irrigation water, then that's why it was irrigated 4. It wasn't irrigated 1 land because it wasn't the higher quality soils and drainage and all those things. So it's been irrigated 4. It would, lack of water would then transfer it to probably dry farming 4 and not just drop down to grazing. So, yeah, so I have a lot of people who have irrigated land, but they choose to use it for grazing, but that doesn't change the classification. But irrigated 1 through 4 land can easily change to orchard 1 through 4 because they planted fruit trees. And if they're orchard 1 through 4 and they tear out all the fruit trees, they can transfer over to irrigated 1 through 4. So yes, there is some play as to different land classifications based on that, but you would not go from irrigated 4 to grazing 3 just because you chose to use it to graze and not to grow something of more value.
So the whole idea behind Greenbelt is you have to be able to have a reasonable expectation of profit. I believe that's the basis of the law, right? You can't dry farm 5 acres and make money. There is no reasonable expectation of making any kind of a profit. I have a Steiger tractor with a 48-foot disc. I couldn't even turn it around on this piece of property. I mean, it would get so tight. And even if I could farm it, and I did plant winter wheat on it, just the cost to move the tractor there would be probably 3 or 4 times more than what the value of the crop would be. So we gotta do what makes common sense, right? I mean, that argument to me just makes no sense. There's no practical reasoning for thinking that is even a feasible prospect. I don't get that. I mean, the idea is to use the ground to make money in agriculture. And honestly, the only way you can do that is maybe you could plant an orchard or something. I don't know. I don't know anything about that business. I mean, I know they're shrinking. I know they're disappearing. The practical use is to graze it because of the liability of trying to irrigate it, the cost of trying to farm it. What they're saying is it doesn't matter. Go lose money. That makes no sense. That makes no sense.
And I think if I'm hearing, Diane's standpoint, it's there are challenges with every different farm, right? But what you've applied for and whether it meets is really what I'm hearing you say, right? And you bring up a lot of great challenges that we've faced getting farm equipment there and things like that. And I don't know that ever really plays into your decision making, if I'm being on, right? You're just saying, does it produce and meet the requirements?
We're arguing about what the practical classification is. And
so that's one of my questions is you brought up dry 3 or dry 4. Had they applied with dry 3 or dry 4, would we be having a different conversation, or?
They still wouldn't meet the production requirements for dry 3 or dry 4 because they're the same as irrigation 4. We are not saying that he has to dry farm. He can graze. He just has to meet the higher production level of the classification of the land. Diane has more information on that. I don't know off the top of my head.
Diane, do you have more information? Hold on a second. Diane, do you have more information on that?
So this has been a fairly recent, well, in the last 6 or 7 years, issue that the State Tax Commission has had to address. So before that, they did not have AUMs calculated for irrigated 1 through 4 because there weren't farmers who grazed livestock on irrigated 1 through 4 because they made more money growing a more profitable crop. But as some counties started getting people grazing on irrigated land, they didn't have an AUM because they only had grazing AUMs set. So the state set the AUM requirements for all irrigated 1, 2, 3, 4, and dry farming. And those are all different per counties because those are affected a lot by how many frost-free days and precipitation, that are so different. Wasatch County is different than us. Washington County is way different than us. So every county has a different AUM that the state now goes with for irrigated land and dry farming, and our county is 5.21 AUMs. Grazing 3 is like 0.33, not even 1 AUM. So there's a huge difference and, level to meet, between those two.
Say that last part again, one more time. The AUM part?
That
Utah County is.
Yeah, Utah County, the state has set the AUMs for irrigated land and for dry farming land. If the landowner chooses to use it for grazing instead of growing a crop, the state has set the AUMs, and our county is 5.21. Every county is different. So we are 5.21 AUMs per acre, and then you only have to meet just over the 50% of that calculation.
And who helps decide the AUMs for the state or for our county?
Who decides?
Yeah.
The committee that has the Department of Ag and the Farm Bureau members and the statisticians from the university, the committee, whatever their official title, I don't remember, but it's the committee that sets that. They also set the value every year for all the different land classifications per county as well.
And are we just talking about 2022 currently, or are we also talking about the new application for 2023 current? Have you been?
Right. I mean, they
any
applied in May, so we wouldn't have had any knowledge of anything that happened after May because the application was for the 2024 year, which would have been, the 2023 year. I'm already in 2024.
Sure.
The 2023 year, and no, it's 2024, right? You guys just sent it, right?
We're saying that we've
Yeah. So So this application is for the 2024 year. And so they have to show for 2022 and for 2023.
Okay.
So I'm glad you got this up. If you go back through this, I think in Utah County, there's 7 different precipitation zones, and so you go through and you get points, and we ended up, I think, with 9 points, 8 or 9 points. But think about this. The statewide average yield for irrigated ground for alfalfa is 3.5 tons per acre. The statewide average yield for dry farm alfalfa is like 0.98. To say that there's no difference between irrigated and unirrigated tillable ground doesn't make any sense. I mean, there's a reason you irrigate it, and that's to get a higher yield. What they're saying is whether you irrigate it or not, you should be getting the same yield. That's actually not the way this is written. I mean, it was changed because there are a lot of guys now who graze under pivots, and different things like that. It's really common, like down around Beaver, Panguitch, not so common around here because there's not that much ground anymore. But you can see that I think it says statewide in here, grazing in all counties, but that's even not accurate because if you go back into this, it has different precipitation zones. There's higher, this piece of ground actually happens to be in one of the higher precipitation zones. I think it's like 11.87 inches of rain per year. There are parts of Utah County that are down around 7. So the county's not all the same. There's a lot of differences. Otherwise, we should all be growing alfalfa out in Eagle Mountain. That's what they're trying to tell you, is that the county is all the same. It's not. Scroll back a little bit. There's some, I'm not sure. I think it's the opposite direction. There's some charts in here. See, here it is right here. Utah County, Alberta, Lower American Fork, Provo, Santaquin, Spanish Fork, Thistle, Utah Lake, Lehigh, Utah Lake Pumping Station. Over on the right-hand column is the annual precipitation for each one of those zones just in Utah County. So it's not just, there's not just one flat county-wide or statewide requirement for grazing. It's based on the precipitation zone. And then there's another chart that has the heat zone, the number of days. It's based on altitude. Panguitch has a lot lower, less grazing days or growing days than Utah County because of the temperature and stuff. So when we went through this and we figured this out, we used these charts that are in the state code. It's not just one big flat 5.3. It's not that. I mean, it's a lot more complicated. You know, Utah County's not all the same. I mean, we know that. We drive through it, right? I mean, you can go up in the mountains and go to the pine trees, or you can go out in the West Desert. And I mean, anyway, I don't know. I feel like we're getting like pushed into a box that doesn't exist. So.
Can I ask for a procedural clarification, Paul? Are we, it's my understanding that we're just looking to see whether they meet the Greenbelt requirements for their current classification, and the reclassification isn't actually before you guys on appeal. Is that correct? Is the matter of the reclassification up for appeal right now, or are we looking at the Greenbelt status under their current classification?
I think the appeal can include land classification.
Does this one currently?
This says it's just application. This is approve or
Yeah, so-
deny application.
Yeah, so if it's being denied based on land classification, I think that can be included in with the current appeal. And if we need to take some more time and look at it, I think that's
We've
fine
had to
too.
massage some of this over the months.
So I also need to throw a wrench in this whole thing.
Don't do that.
It is a wrench. So this parcel that we're discussing that they did their application for, it no longer exists. It's already been split. So, they split off the section that was road, and they did a partial payment of the rollback to pay that road because they needed to record their commercial plat with Lehigh City. And so they needed that. The Lehigh City requires that anything, going for road on a plat has to have all the taxes paid, including the rollback. So this parcel is not a valid parcel for 2024, and that's what the application was originally for. So it would need to be modified, and the legal description of the new 2024 parcel is what would need to be applied for. They still have till May 1st of 2024 to apply for 2024. I mean, we're dealing with 2024. 2023 is not in discussion right now anyway. So you may want to continue it. You may want to deny it and then have them do a new application for the new parcel number. And then, because I really can't put it on Greenbelt because it doesn't exist for 2024. There's no way I can put it on Greenbelt. It's a killed parcel. It now is several parcels. So that's a wrench.
Aaron?
First, just speaking principle here. One of the challenges with this process is the communication between this office and residents or landowners. It's completely ridiculous that we spend your time and everybody else's time to come here and have these conversations when we reach out to you with phone calls, emails, to sit down and go through this stuff and resolve it beforehand. We are not trying to evade paying our taxes. We're just trying to pay them at the right time. And the fact that we have to come here and learn all of this from you is ridiculous. It's not appropriate. the parcel, when we applied with this application, did exist. And in the last 4 weeks, was it 4 weeks ago? Yeah, give or take, it's 4 weeks ago. That separate plat was recorded because this has taken us, how long now? A year? This has taken us a year to resolve this issue. So to not hold up development in a separate partnership, land owned with separate people, we had to adjust the plat that's been hung up for a year because she won't sit down and resolve the situation. She just continues to kick them out, kick them out, kick them out. You may want to actually do this, and it's just getting ridiculous.
So you let her know when that happened?
100%. Like, how many of us reached out to you, came down, sat in your office, waited for you to respond, spent hours of 2 different companies' times trying to connect with you just on that issue alone to say, we will pay our rollback taxes on the road. And now because this plat has taken a year to resolve this rollback tax issue, we'll carve out the road, pay the the rollback tax, which we've done, and then we'll address this issue over here on the 16 acres of farmland. And she said, okay, yeah, that will work. Took us about, I'd have to go look at the dates. It took us almost 3 weeks to come to that conclusion on just that one issue. So I do not want to punt this again, not under any circumstances. I will appeal to the state if you deny it, because we are getting the runaround on this whole entire process. We are here because we got taken out of Greenbelt wrongfully in 2022. And in an effort to work with the county and work with your different caps that you mentioned in February this year, I agreed to do a deferral and abatement period because we were operating in Greenbelt and we continue. I told you we will continue to operate in Greenbelt. So in good faith, I will accept your denial. I will appeal for deferral and abatement, and I'll continue to operate, and we'll solve everybody's problems in one more meeting. You read the letter. That did not happen, and that happened because it was bad faith on the county's part. Complete bad faith. We spent 3 months from the first time we were here in April for that deferral and abatement period, communicating back and forth with that office and with the attorneys, asking if there was anything missing. Do you need anything else from us? No question about land classification. No question about, you don't even have an application for Greenbelt. So the deferral and abatement is completely void and null. We find that out in August. As you all know, you were all here. We all wasted our time together that day. And now we're back here again on an appeal for Greenbelt status on the same 16 acres. It's been in Greenbelt since 2013, and it still is today. And you can go through Grays 3 status, and you can look at all of the water and precipitation and soil classifications and vegetation, and you get to 9 points, which is Grays 3. There is no reason why this should go again. And if it does, I'll go to the state, and I'll deal with it there. This is a complete waste of everybody's time.
I don't see it as a waste of time. I see it as the process. And I mean, that's why I was unaware of this situation, that I appreciate that you let her know. And she, not just Diane, but that whole office is dealing with a lot of different parcels, right? And different Greenbelt. So I'm just
We
stating.
we submitted the application. We asked for feedback from Diane. Well, how long will it take you to respond to this? I have no idea. You have no idea? I have no idea. I need the application in my hand.
I think
We said, we've emailed you the application. We've emailed you the application. I don't want an email. I want a hard copy. Send me the hard copy.
You've
Then
seen
it
the
turned-
4 today. Every situation's very unique, right? And
And
so
it
she
turned
doesn't
3
know.
weeks, maybe 3 months.
And I don't
It
want to
responded back
argue
like
or
that.
I don't want to get into an argument or but I guess what I'm saying is I am defending their efforts that there's no boogeyman here. We're just they do the best job they can in their office, and I hope I can get that across, because I understand your frustration, but I don't think we're wasting anybody's time here. I think we're getting it right. If you know what I'm saying, if we were just to rush it, I think we would be doing a disservice to you as a taxpayer. But every situation is unique and different. So, but I think our elected assessor is right behind you, and he wants to say something.
I'm Bert Garfield, County Assessor. I'd like to defend Diane for her efforts. As you know, last year, we requested a second Greenbelt specialist due to the workload, which was denied. She's doing the best she can by herself as the only Greenbelt person in our office. We do our best to try to educate people on Greenbelt processes, requirements. Some people apply for, I'm not saying them, but some people apply for Greenbelt having no knowledge what Greenbelt is. And we do our best to try to educate them. It is a voluntary program. No one's forced to be on Greenbelt. They volunteer for it. And if they're going to be on Greenbelt, they better know their facts. They better know what they're doing. So we have 15 job openings in the assessor's office. So to say that we're ridiculous or negligent or imply anything to that, they don't know what they're talking about. So I just want to make that point.
I think that's also what I was saying, Aaron, and I know how frustrating this has been. We've spent a lot of time together, but I don't want it to be looked at as a waste of time. We want to make sure we get it right, because if we just were to just stamp it and say denied, you would probably appeal it to the state, and but today, as of today, my decision making is based upon what we've talked about, and that's my option, is to either deny it, and I see you shaking your head and understand if that is the approach that you as the landowner want, would prefer, I'm happy to deny, but I'm leaning towards continuing because I want to get it correct. But I don't know how Commissioner Sakovic is feeling.
I would prefer to continue this, as painful as this whole process has been. It's been evolving because we did not have all the facts. New facts came up, the boundaries were changed, and so we're trying to address that. So I would rather just continue this.
So what does continue mean?
We could come back in 2 weeks, our next BOE meeting.
Month or so.
It's pretty quick in 2 weeks, but then or in January, but really reapplying with now the parcel information that has recently changed.
The only difference would be a new parcel number. It's the exact same parcel. And have you even assigned a new parcel number?
We know this. The assessor's office doesn't assign parcel.
Okay, so
It would be the recorder's office.
how would we do that?
Okay, so I could print you out a new application that would still be for the 2024 year. It would be for not just the new parcel number, but the new legal description. So that's what's critical, and that's why emailing an application doesn't work, because it is a recordable document and it is placing a lien on your property. So it has to be the original application that has the original signature with the original notary stamp, because we do not want someone else putting a lien on somebody else's property. So it has to be owner initiated, and it has to be the original application, and it has to be the legal description of that property. So if you went with the application now, then they have to do it all over again because the parcel is split. And whenever parcel split and the legal description changes, I have to send out a new application because it is legal specific. So they would have to do it all over again anyway. And so we might as well only do it once and do it for the legal description that is for 2024, unless between now and the end of December, they record another document that changes the legal description, then that would be the valid number for 2024. So anything recorded in 2023 creates what 2024 will be, whether it's, legal description change or ownership change.
No other changes anticipated, Aaron, this year, correct?
No.
Okay, understood.
So besides the fact of the parcel and a notarized legal description, what else happens in this punting or continuing situation? Are we going to continue to debate back and forth about whether for a certain graze or not a graze? Like, how do we come to that resolution, I guess is my point. Because you've made an argument and we've made an argument based off of state statute, what it qualifies as. What do we need to do to actually just decide which one you're going to decide it is?
Are you answering that, Bert?
Well, here's a thought. You've already said that if you deny this, he's going to appeal it to the state, okay? The state is the people that put together the AUMs. They're very well aware of Greenbelt rules. If you say you're going to appeal it to the state, if you deny it, I honestly think you may want to take it to the state. So maybe you want it denied now, so then you can go straight to the state. If they continue it, they're just postponing it.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to get at.
Do you want them to postpone it, or do you want them to make a decision now? And then you can take it to state. In the state, the hearing, you're sworn in, it takes 2 or 3 hours, and you really get into the details. Do you want to, I'm just asking you, which would you
But
prefer?
I think either way, we have to prove something, right?
Right.
So I just want to know, have we proved it and we just have the wrong legal description, or have we not proved it?
Well, that's their decision to make.
That's what my question is.
Yeah, that's your decision.
Our recorder's gonna address this. Andrea.
Hi, Andrea Allen, Utah County Recorder. I just want to, as I've been listening, I know that you deeded off the road to Lehigh City. Are you planning on recording that subdivision plat in 2023?
It's been sitting at the city, I think, since we had signed it and paid the tax.
But is the plat going to be recorded? Because if it's recorded before December 30th, you'll have another set of new numbers. Because with the road coming off, we'll separate that off and you'll get a new legal description and a new number. And if that plat is recorded, I don't know where you're at in that process, but if the city records that plat by the end of the year, you will now have another new legal. So you'll have 3 different legal descriptions that would have been valid in 2024. So, yeah. So you might want to know where you're at with your development of this property.
I know where we're
So-
at with the development. I guess the question that you're asking is, has the city actually recorded it?
Correct.
She would,
So
well,
I don't know.
You don't know?
I'm not
Okay.
familiar with this. I don't know if
Okay.
we have the plat in, but they would know it's the city's plat. It's the city's responsibility to get it to the county. So you might want to find out where they're at in that process.
Would it be
So-
reflected on your website if it's recorded?
If it is recorded, yes.
So it's reflected on.
Well,
So,
well, that could take,
would be not necessarily the new number. I don't know where we're at in.
Is there anybody that could check to the website to see if it's been recorded?
What was the name of the development?
Was the Ridge Holdings plat?
this is the most unusual one.
okay, fair enough.
Ridge Holdings?
Subdivision?
I think it's Ridge Holdings Retail Subdivision.
I don't see anything as of 2 days ago.
Okay, so if the city has not recorded it, you're suggesting get it recorded before we apply, before we fill out a different application? Okay,
We've spun this now quite a few times. So is the outcome that we're looking for is to continue this or deny this based on
Yeah.
what we've gathered together?
I think the assessor had made a great point, and I think that's the point that I'm trying to make is, are we pushing this because the property doesn't have the right property number? Because we need to have a different application now that it's changed since then. Are we pushing it for that reason? Or are we pushing it because you're still questioning whether it's been in Greenbelt? That's what I'd like to know. If you're pushing it because if you agree that it's Greenbelt status and we just need to get the property, done?
Things will change, right? With the change of the subdivision recorded plat. A new application would then have, Diane look at the property and see if the amount of grazing and all of the
Nothing will
requirements are met.
change. It's all of that's been presented to her in this application.
If nothing would change, then
Acreage will change.
the acreage, yeah, and
I think it goes from 16.49 to 15.1 or 14.95. So you're just missing a strip of road down at the bottom. So none of the other details about the graze 3 or the cows in 22 or the cows in 23, nothing else changes. And that's my question for you is, have we done a sufficient job explaining to you why and proving to you through the letter and the calculations that we have operated in Greenbelt? And your only concern is the property number, then I would appreciate the continuation, and we'll go get the property number and we'll get that recorded. If we're going to come back here and debate again about 22 and 23 and land classification, I don't have a lot of confidence left in that process because
Understood.
we've done that several times.
understood. But I think the continuation was really
Something really quick.
a recommendation from Diane.
Because even if they continue it, and let's say they side with you, the assessor's office can appeal it to the state. So you can appeal it to the state, the assessor's office can appeal to the state. I don't think I think there's a strong possibility this is going to end up at the state, one way or another. So do you want to get there as fast as possible?
Do you agree that we're in Greenbelt or not?
I'm not convinced you are, no.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to get at. So
Yeah.
you're going to continue.
But it's not my decision to make. It's their decision to make
Understood.
right now.
But the reason I'm hung up is I think it was Diane's suggestion that as a result of the land changing, that we continue it.
Actually, I said deny it, and then they do a new application, because it would be a new legal description that we would be deciding.
Okay.
So either way, deny it, and
But even to Aaron's argument, even then, it's probably, we accomplish both things. If he wants to appeal it to the state at that point, fine. But if he wants to reapply with the new, the understanding is still that it does not meet your requirements. Understood.
So in the continuation, you're saying there's not even an option to continue because it's not the right parcel. Is that what you're saying?
because it's not a valid 2024 parcel, and you're applying for 2024.
Okay.
So I think what we should do is deny this, and that you can then separately get any additional questions answered from staff while they're here.
Either reapply with the new, or at that point, you also would have the option to appeal to the state with
So-
this current application that we are denying. But then the reality is that the
How's that
numbers would
gonna
be
work?
different.
If you deny an application that has the wrong property number, can I still go to the state with the wrong property number? I can't.
Well, it depends
So
what year you're talking about.
Well, I
We-
think we have to, 2024 is the year we're talking about, right?
Yeah, so, yeah, that's true. If they deny it, well,
Then you have until May 1st.
I mean, if the parcel doesn't exist,
For the 2024, I know,
I mean, we're not even, this is all a mute point, isn't it?
because I can't put it on, because it's not a taxable parcel for 2024. So you might want to just wait, reapply, and then we can deny it, and, I mean, you guys don't have to show
Would the
up for
best
that.
approach be withdraw the appeal and then reapply under the correct parcel number?
Or deny it, either way. Withdraw it, can- Like, you can withdraw, or
trying.
they can deny. If you deny it, that still gives him appealable, even if, whatever.
I think, because I do this all the time, that in order to give him all of his rights and options, if you deny it, then he can still appeal that, but he can also still apply. So he can start that appeal process, but also apply with the new number. He can always withdraw his appeal based on whatever happens with the other process, but I think that's where things went wrong before, is that He came, they were denied, and they were told to take it to a different venue and do a different process, and that failed him. And so then he did not start the appeal process to the state based on promises made. And I don't want to make promises. I want to say he has a lot of options. He can appeal your denial for this parcel and get the process started and do an application for the new 2024 number, wait and see what new number is given with the new plat that's going to get recorded when. Maybe it'll get recorded January 2nd for all we know. I don't know. And so then he gets the 2024 number, which is kind of like the interim number right now, and then he'll have a new 2025 number, which he will still have to apply for Greenbelt when that change occurs. So, because by law, whenever the legal description changes, you have to do a new application. But I think giving him all the options and avenues to take is the best thing. Then it's his decision, and we didn't close doors on him.
If there was a new application and there was a
Yeah, I don't know. You'd have to show it to
Mr.
Andrea,
Chairman,
'cause
if I
don't
could
know.
provide some clarification, it's from a procedural standpoint as far as appeals and maintaining rights. At question today is the denial of the application based on the parcel and legal description that was applied for on this application. If the board denies the application today, the appellant can then appeal that decision to the State Tax Commission. What will be considered the State Tax Commission is whether the appeal was denied. Whether the application was denied correctly, meaning that the question of production and the question of land classification could be taken up by the State Tax Commission, and that question could be answered. But regardless of that, the appellant will need to file a new application because it is statute that a greenbelt when there's a change in legal description or ownership, the new application has to be made. Since there has been a legal description change with the reduction of the road, regardless of whether you were to deny or approve the application today, the appellant would have to apply for make a new application for Greenbelt anyways with the new legal description. So the question of new application is required regardless of any outcome here today. What can be decided at the state is whether or not the county, if the application was denied, what can be decided at the state is the question of production and the question of land classification. If the state sides with the appellant, that then shows that the appellant was correct, that the appellant's level of production or question of production and question of land classification was correct, and that would then be relevant to the new application being made under the new legal description. But either way, a new application will be required, and at that point, that application will then be reviewed and either accepted or denied. And at that point, the process would start over for that application. But the application today could still answer many questions, whether it was done here or at the state level. I don't know if that, hopefully that helps.
The question I was about to ask was if their new application had any information that was different than this current application, other than the parcel number. Is it possible that that would then allow your recommendation of Greenbelt to be approved? There's something that could change in the new application, right?
Right.
Okay. So,
To be honest, I think the most merciful, most reasonable thing to do is deny the application further and keep the ball rolling so you can get to the resolution as soon as possible. I hate for you to keep waiting. So he gets more rights in his basket if you deny it, because then he can really act on it.
understood.
It looks, Andrea, like this was recorded on November 6th, 2023. It's got your stamp on it, or barcode, I think. I'm right?
Yeah, that's the deed to Lehigh City. That's not the subdivision plat. This
Okay.
created a new description different from what you had applied for
For the road.
the remaining parcel. It created its own description for the road. This describes the road. And then what the road came out of gets a new description and new parcel numbers. It doesn't
And
stay the same.
I understand that.
And
And you're
that
saying
is
that's a result
different.
of the plat being recorded?
No, that's a result of this document being recorded. There was also a quick.
I think what we're gonna do is let's have a conversation. We'll move on. It sounds like we're inclined to make a denial today, so that doesn't hold you up and gives you, like Bert says, all of your eggs in the basket of being able to your
So
most
then will we
options.
go to the state under which parcel? How does that work?
That's entirely up to you. If you want to appeal, but
don't-
as Bert Harvey said, it would be the one that we're denying
Yeah,
today.
it would be denial of the current part of the current application with the current parcel number with the current legal description, which has been killed, but it's still this application, which at the state, the question will be the
Did we
production.
satisfy?
Yeah, did you meet, are you meeting production? Is the land classification valid? Those are the questions you need to get answered at the state. That would then have bearing on any new and future applications for this property to stay, to be put into or maintain greenbelt status.
Just so I'm clear, so if we go to the estate, appeal under a bad parcel, but they agree with production, then I come back and I apply with the right parcel
Right.
and the state's decision, or do you guys still have to?
The state's decision the state's decision of, if the state was to rule in your favor and find that the parcel did have enough production and or the land classification was appropriate or inappropriate or whatever they ruled, that would then carry forward to any future application.
Okay.
So,
That would give us bearing for your new application. You're
Yeah.
gonna have to make a new application anyway.
Yeah, because there's a new
But
parcel.
it'd be nice to resolve it with
The state, rather than resolve it here.
Because
Yeah.
they're more, and they'll do the numbers, they will do the calculations, they will figure it out, help us
Yep.
clarify.
What were you
How
gonna
does
say?
that affect the rollback? Like I mean, when I came here the first time, and I'm not the owner, and I'm not making the decision, but I walked out of here, and you guys had said, you two were here, and the lady was on the phone, was.
The deferral and the
We're
abatement.
gonna work out an abatement. I mean,
all right.
you said, don't send it to the state, you're gonna get beat up there, but we can work this out through an abatement. And I kind of thought that's what was gonna happen. I thought it was done. And then I don't understand.
Well, the legal description now has been muddied. That's part of the
That's not
problem.
the legal description. The point he's making is when we were here the first time in
Right.
February, he said we can work it out in a deferral and abatement, which Diane, I'll personally apologize for being as frustrated and animated towards you as possible, or as I was here. That was inappropriate. You're somebody's mom, you're somebody's wife, you're somebody's grandma, and I'm sure that you're a beautiful person. This process has been extremely frustrating for me, and I apologize for doing that. That was inappropriate. With respect to the situation here, like, we felt like we were not in a debate about whether or not we were in Greenbelt. We thought we were coming to do a deferral and abatement in April and then in August, and then I've been surprised by these. That's what he's saying. So if the best thing right now is to go to the state to have them answer that question, and if you guys don't want to answer it, then we'll go that route if that's the best thing to do.
Appears to be the best route all around right now.
Commissioners, I can also provide some clarification on the question of the rollback, because the rollback was already decided and the rollback has been in place, which if it hasn't been paid, then it's like taxes, it needs to be paid. If the rollback has been paid, then the question of rollback is not part of this, because this is to place, the question of this application is to place the property on Greenbelt from this day moving forward, which would restart the rollback clock. This is a denial of an application, but had the application been approved today, it would simply restart the rollback clock moving forward, and then, which would also restart the 5-year clock that was referenced in previous agenda items. So meaning that if the property went off Greenbelt, if it was approved today and property went off Greenbelt a year from now, you'd only have 1 year rollback. So the rollback has already been taken place, is already on the record, needs to be paid. From previous boards and previous processes, previous appellants who have had a rollback and had to go on like urban renewal or been able to get back on Greenbelt later on. I know that has been taken before the commission in a 1347 to have the rollback deferred until and as long as the property stays on Greenbelt after having been denied, rollback and put in place, but then gotten back on Greenbelt or been on urban farming, then that those taxes are deferred until the point that the 5 years expires, and the taxes are then wiped away after having stayed on Greenbelt. I know that's part of the process, but I don't think the Greenbelt rollback taxes that were assessed previously are part of this conversation because that matter has been decided.
I didn't think that was decided. That was the deferral and abatement application that we'd made, and
Right.
that was continued
Yeah.
because
And
we
if
needed,
that-
we needed a Greenbelt application,
Right, and I
which
think
is what this was.
And if the question was whether the rollback, because the rollback is from previously, and this is a new application, so that's a separate issue than this application. This application is to get you on Greenbelt, and if the property is then placed back on Greenbelt, I believe that's when a 1347 question is taken before the commission under their legislative authority to abate or defer taxes. And in other cases, I believe a deferral has been granted, and as long as the property stays on Greenbelt, the taxes stay deferred until, and every year is taken off of that until a full 5 years if the property stays, or if the property is then taken
Or
off
just
Greenbelt.
slides,
Yeah, or just slides.
which is exactly what we thought that we
Right.
were doing in February, that we had not been taken off Greenbelt, that there was an assessment done for rollback
Yeah.
taxes, but we could defer and abate that if we continued to maintain Greenbelt status.
To answer the other question on the rollback taxes, they're already, I would assume, on place, and I haven't verified that. I'm sure that's what's going on. The taxes will stay on there. They will accrue penalties and interest until they are paid. If they have not been paid, state law allows us to not take any negative action against a taxpayer until 5 years have expired. At that point, a property go to tax sale. Everything's 5 years in Utah. So the question of whether the rollback taxes are there and the status of the property on Greenbelt or off Greenbelt, this is a new application that doesn't necessarily answer the old question of the rollback taxes unless that's answered by the Board of Commissioners in a 1347 action after the status of the property's Greenbelt is answered, whether that's answered by the state through a state appeal or through a new application that's then approved by the county. The Greenbelt taxes are a separate issue.
What's the status of the deferral and abatement application that we submitted?
I don't know. That would be, I'm just speaking to the procedure and process.
So it's a different hat, so you can't answer that? Is that?
Yeah, that we have.
I mean, I know it wasn't
my-
granted. I don't know if it was denied or
We just,
in commission meeting. But
we continued it knowing that this application was about to take place. So if today it's denied, my question then is, if they reapply, does it still just stay continued until we have an answer? Or if there's an appeal to the state, we just wait, correct? I mean, and it sounds like you would have until 2027 by the 5-year clock that Bert Harvey just mentioned, essentially?
If they replied in 2023, a property won't be eligible for tax sale until 2028.
Gotcha.
So,
Yeah, we'll resolve it before then. So the deferral and abatement application is still in place. We need to go get an answer from the state. And then we know whether we gotta pay the tax or we defer and abate. Is that correct? Are we all on the same page?
Yep. So
Sounds
for
like it.
today's action is to, for me at least, is to go ahead and deny the application so that way we can get this thing going and worked out at the state level.
Great.
I'll second that motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so we need one final motion.
I don't think there's anything else. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye.